Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Drowning is Preventable speaker series. This is part 2. This is a speaker series that is done with Break to collaborate through the CPRS aquatic section. It's a new series and we are hopeful to bring you a ton of great information. My name is Liddy Gutfeld. I am your CPRS Aquatics President and CPRS Past State President. With me today is Stephanie Molina. She is your Aquatics Section President. And I have the honor to introduce our CPRS President for this year, Tom Hillman. Currently, Tom is serving as the 75th President of CPRS and is also a Recreation and Community Services Manager with the City of Folsom, where he manages aquatics, sports, community services, art services, and is also the project manager for the Johnny Cash Trail Art Experience. Previously, he served as a recreation supervisor for 17 years with oversight of aquatics, where he was recognized in 2011 by Aquatics International magazine as a next generation of top 25 professionals. He received the 2011 CPRS Citation of Merit Award, is a past president of the aquatic section, and is a certified lifeguard and has been since 1993. He possessed the ARC lifeguard instructor and instructor training certifications and AFO during his time as an aquatics professional. So Tom, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. Coming to you live from the pool deck. This was not scripted, not planned, but very fitting, I guess. So had to rush out here for a interview this morning with a news station. So wanted to take the time to welcome you all and say thank you so much for joining part 2 of this wonderful series that the aquatic section is putting on. It's great, a wonderful lineup of this morning with the folks that are on here to discuss water safety, drowning prevention, aquatic programming, and probably some other topics that will organically come out of it. Tuesday was fabulous. I'm sure Thursday will shape up to be just as fabulous. So my thanks to Stephanie and Liddy with the aquatic section for this wonderful series, and for all of you for joining. CPRS is all about engagement. It's all about uniting our members and finding ways to give education, to provide networking and collaboration efforts. We all know from this past year that we are all better together, but at the same time, you have an opportunity today and every day as we move forward into this summer season and beyond to connect with your membership, your colleagues, your friends, and now your new friends. So I would venture to say that all of our panelists here today will be happy to share resources and be there for you if you need them or in any way, shape, or form, just as you all will be there for each other. So just wanted to welcome you all, say thank you so much. Look forward to a great morning for you all. I'm sorry I won't be able to stay on, but did just want to say thank you and congratulate you all for a great series and a very safe summer season as you navigate the fun that will happen. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom. We are really excited to have some great discussions with these experts today. And our goal is to have some learning outcomes of hopefully getting you some new strategies in the preventative mindset for facility preparation, maybe how to keep your documentation current, correct, and consistent, customizing your services to have preventative practice, and how to practice advocating to non-aquatic management, and also strategies for leadership, getting you guys stronger leaders out of the water. For this second part of our DIP speaker series, we are super excited to introduce you to our panel. So I will go ahead and get that started. Very first is Justin Sempsrat. He started his aquatics career as a beach lifeguard before going to medical school, where he started the nonprofit Lifeguards Without Borders. He's also the co-founder of the International Drowning Researchers Alliance and works full-time as an emergency medicine physician in the rural Western United States. Welcome, Justin.
Good morning.
Wes Long is president of Starguard Elite, SGE. Wes oversees the aquatic industry's fastest growing aquatic safety company that provides service to over 300 clients worldwide, including many of the largest private and public organizations. Prior to SGE, Wes worked throughout the aquatics industry for many of the world's top resorts and water parks, including Atlantis at the Palm, Dubai, Walt Disney World, and Palace Entertainment. Additionally, Wes has worked with projects of every size, providing support for initial concept, construction, operational development, safety consulting, staff training, and regulatory compliance. I'm out of breath, Wes. Wes currently serves as the chair of the World Water Park Association Safety Committee and is active within many other organizations and committees. And next, so welcome, Wes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Dan Brzezinski is the founder and CEO of Premier Aquatic Services, which operates 3 independent brands: Premier Aquatics, Premier Health and Safety, and Premier Safety Academy, or Swim Academy, excuse me. Since 2011, Premier Aquatic Services has grown into a full swim school, lifeguard service, and health and safety education provider. Premier employs over 200 year-round employees and ramps up to over 450 seasonal employees in over 100 locations throughout California and Arizona. In all, Dan has over 20 years of coaching and teaching experience, as well as 20 years of experience in large-scale project management. In his free time, Dan is the director for Stop Drowning Now, a drowning prevention education program, which provides free drowning prevention education programs for children, and also the co-chair of the Orange County Drowning Prevention Task Force. Dan lives in Laguna Niguel with his wife and 3 young children. Welcome, Dan. And finally, Corey Hildebrand is currently the Community Services Manager of Aquatics, Arts, and Human Services for the City of Irvine. He currently oversees a staff of more than 200 and manages day-to-day activities for 2 year-round aquatic facilities, 2 art-specific centers, 3 senior centers, 1 disability center, and trips, dispatch, and operations. Corey has worked in aquatics and recreation management for more than 20 years in both Washington and California for both public and private agencies. He has stayed active in the aquatics industry by participating in various committees and coalitions, and is currently the president of the Association of Aquatic Professionals. Now, welcome, Corey. Now that you have all met these amazing gentlemen, let's go ahead and get into it. On Tuesday, our panel was really heavily focused on leadership, culture, and recognizing when changes need to be made. Today, I have asked you guys to join me so we can get some meaty lifeguard and rescue strategies that lifeguards or leaders in aquatic and non-aquatic can better grasp and hopefully implement in their agencies. The goal, obviously, is to have a discussion. So with those of you who are participating on the call, if there's something that gets you going and you want to ask a question, go ahead and put it in the chat. Stephanie Molina will be getting those to me, and we will have a time to break and ask those additional questions at the end. As far as my panelists, you guys know, just jump in and add those nuggets if you have them. We're here for information and learning. So let's go ahead and get started. Wes, I'm going to start with you. The Today Show on Tuesday aired a 4-minute segment on lifeguard shortage. Many lifeguards and WSI certifications have expired due to the lack of training options available through the Red Cross and other organizations. Talk to us about your company and give us some alternative actions that agencies can take to get their guards certified quickly and effectively.
Yeah, sure. And thank you again for having me. So, the lifeguard shortage and the inability to, to staff facilities where we all would like them to be it's the fact that it's getting national news is obviously, reflective of the situation. It's not unique to any specific market or any type of aquatic facility. In terms of things that operators can be doing, I think one of the key things is just simply going back and really revisiting how you've been doing your recruiting and your training, and not just kind of going back to doing exactly what you did in 2019 or before, and adopting a lot of some of the new strategies. From our company, we've done a lot with the with various virtual courses, being both the online blended learning element, but then also actually doing some Zoom or other type of virtual training ahead of time to further reduce some of the the in-person time demands that you get, because it's not only a lack of lifeguards, a lot of times it's a lack of instructors. It might be a lack of be able to get large groups together or have pool space or other things. And so really kind of going back and reinventing how things are done. From our standpoint, there's challenge courses out there, because if you have someone who was previously certified and they're coming back, but their skill set largely will be there, but there's just some rust to knock off. Maybe that's a quick 1-day renewal. Maybe if their skills are where they need to be, you can do a challenge course. Adopting some of the other some of the other new training methods that have been released. I think all of the programs have released a variety of different things throughout 2020. So if you weren't training last year, definitely check with your provider and make sure you know all the different resources that are available. But I think one thing that's important is, when you talk about effectively, is that we continue to hit the key objectives, that we don't cut corners, that we don't make sure that the training is being accommodated for what we just can do now, so that lifeguards are set up for success. They have the skills, they're ready to go when the time comes, because that's probably one of the biggest concerns, is just that people are on a pinch and they're having to do whatever they can, but without necessarily, maybe compromising either some of the training times or the other objectives that lifeguards need to meet. So I think that's hopefully summarizes it, but there's no magic bullet here. I wish there was, or I'd probably be making a lot more money right now. So.
Right? Wouldn't we all be? Go ahead, Dan.
I'll just add that things have changed in the past 4 years. We've had to change our hiring strategy 4 times, and obviously COVID threw a wrench in it. Now what we're seeing is definitely creating more and more challenges, but the way we sell the job, I should say, we now have to sell the job, and the way we sell the job, we have to sell almost more of a different experience. So things like other trainings outside of lifeguarding, whether it's Excel training and how to use certain systems to basically turn this into, I know most of my staff aren't going to make a career out of lifeguarding, but I do know that my staff are all motivated and hungry to do more with their lives. And if we can give them other ways that they can develop themselves, if they are excellent lifeguards, we find that they're knocking on our door a whole lot more than they were. So for example, we do a premier academy where they can do other types of classes. And we even do interview classes for our lifeguards to interview for other jobs. So they learn how to interview for for bigger jobs, I should say. And we help them with networking. We help them with internships. If they come in, they commit to a second or third summer. So just ways to kind of make the job sexier, so to speak, and give them something that they can take with them further down the road when they're done lifeguarding with us.
I think great points, you guys. And I think the flip side of that, I just had this conversation and we brought together our HR and our risk management team and said, okay, we have to be realistic. We're going to be telling this story. If we can't open our doors because there's a lifeguard shortage, we have to communicate that to our community as well. And the biggest thing that we can say is safety first, right? We have to be safe. So Wes, when you talk about cutting corners, that's exactly the conversation I had with our risk manager yesterday. Was I'm not willing to have that on my time clock. I'm not willing to say that we opened it up just because the community wanted it. We did it because it was safe first. And I think that that's really a big part of telling the story. And I think that our lifeguards are going to be, doing a lot of work this summer, especially the ones that are coming on. I know, Dan, I've reached out to you and we're short this summer, and so everybody's got to work together. And I think that that's another story. I reached out to Corey yesterday and said, hey, you can only offer your guards 19 hours a week. I've got another 19 for them. So, tell me which guards you can send over my way and let's give them a 40-hour summer job kind of thing. So, just make sure you guys are talking to your counterparts in other cities and agencies nearby and see how you guys can help one another during this shortage. So Corey, I'm going to take it over to you. Like me, you started your career in aquatics and are now heading a department of many staff. If you can, talk to us about what aquatic professionals can do to build future leaders. Dan was just talking about a few things. What are some strategies that you have used to help you throughout your path to the leadership position you're in now?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like Dan alluded to, is take all growth opportunities that are offered to you and offer those to your staff as well. I know as aquatics, I think as an industry as a whole, we do a really good job of developing our staff. And that just has a lot to do with the training that we're putting them through, and they develop a lot of leadership skills naturally, but providing them the opportunity to take that jump to other areas, if there's special events or, Liddy, you and I have talked a lot this year. COVID has made it a very unique opportunity for a lot of our team members to shine in other areas, whether it's senior services and delivering meals, making meals, or being park ambassadors, or just working at specialized events. I think taking those opportunities and giving your staff or yourself, even if you're looking for growth opportunities, to show what leadership and what skill sets you have is a big thing. And then another thing is taking on special projects. So over my career, I've always, if there's something out there that needs to be done, whether it's right now, we just redid our patron code of conduct. And, you know, I'm always the first to raise my hand and say, I'll help out, I'll lead this, and I got this. And I think those are all things that help you stand out from the crowd. You know, I think the worst thing that we all hear as aquatics professionals is when you go to interview for a leadership position. And I'm sure Lydia's heard this too. Well, you know, you have all of the skill sets that we want, but you're really aquatics heavy. And that always just killed me, because I think the aquatics world can transfer to anything. I mean, if you're leading a staff of 100 and you're managing the day-to-day operations of an aquatic center, that skill set can transfer to anything, in my opinion. And I think those of us that have been successful at moving up have really showed that that's true. And then the last thing is just training opportunities too. Put yourself out there and keep your certifications, but also look for other opportunities to take more advanced trainings. You know, the city of Irvine has offered a lot of things through we have a mentorship program. We have Supervisors Academy and things like that. And while sometimes they maybe look like they're a step down because they don't fit your direct title, I've participated in all of those. And I think everybody should. There's always something to be gained. So taking those classes, going to CPRS conferences or AOAP or whatever it is, and continuing your education, and then taking that back and transferring that. And, you know, don't be shy and ask to present at a leadership meeting of things that you've learned so that you can have that opportunity to shine. And then with staff, I think just providing those same opportunities. So like I said at the start, COVID has really helped us allow our staff to shine. And we got in a unique situation where I had so many aquatic staff out working within our department that just this last week, we actually had to pull back and say, hold on, time out. Now we need them to go back to their normal positions because all these other areas wanted to steal our staff. Because believe it or not, everyone's hurting for hiring positions, not just the aquatics industry. So I know Parks and Rec and everybody is really low. So I think just getting yourself out there. And then the last thing I would say is the hardest thing for us aquatics folks is breaking that mold of being the aquatics person, meaning not wearing flip-flops and shorts every day, putting on your khaki pants and dressing professionally and looking the part too, is a huge help. I can tell you when I was in Carlsbad, and I know Brooke from being down in Carlsbad, but that was the one thing that I was told when I interviewed. Are you sure you're going to want to take off your flip-flops and your shorts and go work at City Hall? How's that transition? And I even got asked that in Irvine when I took this last promotion is, how are you going to transfer from working at the pool and having your office there to City Hall? So don't put yourself in that situation where you have to answer those questions. So I think we're very adaptable and we can certainly make that switch, but you know, look the look as well.
Agree 100%. I think my first week at City Hall in Irvine, I think I got asked probably 10 plus times, do your feet hurt? Do you wish you were still wearing flip-flops? And I was just like, really? That's all you have to ask me? I think two things that I'll tap into that is one, your education, super important. You know, if you have the opportunity to go online now and you can get a master's degree online. I mean, there's no reason for people not to be going back to school. I know it costs money, but almost every agency has an educational reimbursement program. So really look into what your HR can offer you, really look and see how you can better yourself as a leader. And then, you know, tap into the emergency management folks too in your city and see how your aquatic and your rescue experience can really kind of tie into how you can do emergency management as well, because we're usually the first ones that they're going to reach out to make sure we manage an emergency well. So Dan, I'm going to move over to you. While you've been working with the Orange County Drowning Task Force, as well as Stop Drowning Now, why do you feel it is needed to have organizations like that connect with local government and vice versa? And what are some benefits that agencies can gain from having partnerships with those organizations?
Yeah, absolutely. So my personal belief, and I know that Justin and Wes and Corey agree with me, drowning prevention doesn't start at the pool. Drowning prevention starts in the community. And I also know that every single city and every organization is tapped, right? We're tired, we're doing a lot of things. So the biggest benefit with joining with the ranks of a Stop Drowning Now and a local task force, or even creating your own local task force, is that we're not recreating the wheels. So we just put on this weekend, we had 9 cities across Orange County. I see a couple of them on the call. Lydia and Corey are 2 of them, where we put on a countywide drowning prevention drive-through event. Really, really successful event, but that's something that would have been challenging for a city to take on for the first time on their own. So Stop Drowning Now had already created all of the data, all of the collateral, all of the information. In fact, we even delivered the materials to the cities that were participating. So finding partnerships like that, Stop Drowning Now is looking for many of them. So I'll just say that out loud. It just takes a lot of the work off, and it's just a matter of facilitating the eventual event or whatever it might be. So that the drowning prevention information has to go out to the community. It has to. I remember I was at the Justin, you were speaking at this event, but it was one of the Orange County Drowning Coalition groups, and City of Vista came in and talked about the fact that they actually went on Google Earth and they found every house that has a pool in the community, and they hung water watcher tags on the homes, everybody that had a pool in their backyard, something like that. So finding partners that can help get that done, because I know the cities don't have time to do that. Finding partners that can help do that, like Stop Drowning Now, and there's a lot of other organizations. I think we're the best, but that's just my opinion. It's the way to go because it just makes it so easy and affordable.
I will say our experience on, I'm sorry, Justin, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'll just tap and then you jump in. Our experience last Saturday was absolutely amazing. I mean, it was the first time we ran an event and didn't have to do much except show up pretty much. So it was just so nice to have all the resources that you guys provided for us. The signage was great. And it really opened up our eyes to kind of have a better relationship with some of our community partners that we also invited out. It let us have a little bit of extra time there instead of having to worry about all of the other stuff. So we appreciated the partnership. And then on top of that, I had a last minute ask. The mayor said, hey, Lydia, I want to interview a mom or a dad that's, lost a child in a drowning. And the very first person I called was Dan with Stop Drowning Now. I said, Dan, can you give me a list of resources? 10 minutes later, I had a call and we set up the interview. So that type of quick resource management is so awesome. So kudos to you, Dan, and your crew over at Stop Drowning Now and Orange County Drowning Task Force. Excellent. Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think you actually said exactly where I was going to go with it. And that is what I think is a real benefit of some of those foundations is with so much drowning affecting the pediatric and children's, not only do you have the grieving parents and the families, but the aunts, the uncles, and really that entire community. And so the impact of those drowning incidents, whether fatal or non-fatal, really go beyond that immediate family. And the foundations are often an outlet for those families to help prevent it and to work through their grief and to work through the incident by being of service to others. And frequently, they can't go get jobs in city government, and they can be more effective doing them as passion projects or side projects, creating their own foundations or working with others. And it really just humanizes the entire experience. And it's so easy to kind of, in the city government side of things, to get caught up in the statistics and the numbers and the zip codes and the percentages, but when you actually put a face and a first name and a last name and the tears of that family in front of you, I just think that speaks so much more.
Couldn't agree more. So Justin, I'm gonna stay on you. So first off, tell us about Lifeguards Without Borders.
So more than 90% of the world's drowning deaths are in low and middle income countries. And in the US, we typically think of bathtubs, swimming pools, and kind of some of those restricted areas of water where you can just say, okay, just don't go near there and you won't drown. Whereas in most parts of the world, there's ferries, water crossings, flood irrigation, things like that, where the water is ubiquitous and the prevention strategies are different. If everybody's going down to the local river for bathing, collecting water, washing clothes, things like that, then you can't just put up a fence. People are still going to get in that area. And so we were really excited to kind of team up with some agencies around the world to try and address some of the diverse challenges of drowning prevention, rescue, and treatment.
How does one get involved in this organization?
You can hit contact me on our website and go from there. And it's just lifeguardswithoutborders.org.
All right. So you talked about, really learning about every type of drowning situation, but the process of drowning is something that each guard really should understand in order to be more effective in an emergency. If you can, tell us a little bit about the importance of teaching the process of drowning and early rescue breathing.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I've kind of harped on for years is that lifeguards really are professional rescuers, and lifeguards are held to the same standard as the doctors, nurses, and paramedics when it comes to performing that CPR in the pre-hospital setting. And I think the pandemic kind of highlighted that, with lifeguards being considered essential workers in many areas, not just for job class, but for the protections that they do. But if we think of the person that has a sudden cardiac arrest because of obesity, smoking, cardiovascular risk factors, that their heart suddenly goes into an irregular rhythm, they still have oxygen in their blood, and they really need compression-only CPR and defibrillation. But for somebody drowning, whether young or old, the heart has stopped because they've completely used up all of their oxygen. And so it's really important to get oxygen to their brain as quickly as possible to interrupt the drowning process. And the actions of the lifeguard, not just on the prevention side, but also on the treatment side, are more important than anything that I can do in the emergency department. And so the days of the lifeguard being that kind of just bronzed person that sits there passively are no more. They really are a critical component on the prevention side, but also on that rescue and treatment side for drowning. And CPR has to be focused on getting quality, effective breaths and compressions to circulate the oxygen that you're giving them, and not just compression only.
I think you're speaking volumes, because this is, the fight that we constantly have, where we're, fighting for budget to be as equal as fire and police. But so I appreciate those words coming from an MD. It's an inspiration, and I wish we have it recorded, but I'm going to write it down and send it over to the city manager when this is all said and done. All right, Corey, let's go ahead and jump over to you. We're going to talk about some EAPs. Staff learning the EAP for each facility is so crucial. What does your agency do to ensure that staff teams are clear on each facility EAP? And can you talk about how you get staff involved on a citywide effort to look at almost every facility to evaluate and audit EAPs?
Yeah, so first of all, just speaking from an aquatic standpoint, training. So every chance we get, we work on our EAP and go over that process. We take a multi-level approach to that with small teams, large teams, alternating our leadership staff that work with our lifeguard teams as well. Just giving them the opportunity to go through these EAP drills together with all these different types of leaders, different staff, so that we're mixing all these groups. It's been a little tougher with COVID last year because we have not mixed teams. We actually separated our staff into A, B, C teams. So we did our trainings within those small groups. But as we head into our big, large staff training next week, or I should say, as the aquatics team heads into that big staff training next week, it's the first time, gosh, in over 20 years, I won't be involved in staff training, but that is the plan. We have a lot of new staff, which I think everybody's kind of dealing with. We have a staff of about 150. We have 30 returning staff. That's it. All of our staff are relatively new. So they're going to spend a lot of time focusing on, like I said, these small groups and these work teams, and mixing them up, and then providing the opportunity for our leadership team, our pool managers, and our we call them our 911s. Lydia, you probably know that from there, but a really unique name. But we're going to give them the opportunity to lead them through these EAPs as well, and all sorts of different scenarios. So that's kind of how we do that. We work on all our different pools. Willet obviously is a 3-pool facility. So we do drills on each individual pool and then also spend some time up at Northwood too, doing in-service trainings. As far as an entire city, so this is something that I've just kind of been diving into, so to speak, as I've taken over other facilities and finding out that we did not do a very good job of going over any of the EAPs or any of our action plans moving forward. In fact, going over the seniors, that was one of the first things that I asked because we were going through an audit for our Title III, our elderly nutrition program. And it was one of the things that we got marked on in the audit is that we didn't have training records of anything. So started asking, when's the last time we did a fire drill? When's the last time we did that? Well, I don't know. It's probably been, it might've been Liddy when you were here with the city that long ago. So we've really worked to implement monthly trainings now with those teams on all different levels, earthquake drills, fire drills, what happens if 911 is called, what's our response. And I found it so funny with the seniors in particular, because that's a group that every time the fire department or any siren went by, they all would get quiet and wait. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? We're just making sure they're not coming here. I'm like, if you're that scared, we definitely need to go over some of these plans. So I think that's something that after we get through summer, we're going to tackle. And I'm actually going to use the aquatics team, those pool managers, and provide some outreach to all of our different community centers to work with those supervisors to offer some training and some ideas of how they can better train their staff. So I think it's kind of right now, I would say as a whole, the city has not done a great job with our outlying facilities. Aquatics obviously is a unique beast and totally different, but I want to set up a system where they are actually going over the EAPs at each facility every single month with their staff instead of just a one and done type thing, which is what the training has historically been.
Excellent. I think it's such an opportunity to just get into a leadership component with any aquatics teams. We have the experience. We know what we're looking for. It helps you build a relationship with other site supervisors and other city departments. I know at City Hall, one of the very first things I did when I got there in Mission Viejo was I went and flipped open every AED box that I could to see if it would ring, and none of them went off. And then my next question was, when I went into a harassment training, was, where's the AED? Nobody knew where the AEDs were. So it was just kind of educational. It's like, we have it, it's there, but it's not being used and it's not being trained on. And I think that what you're doing is a great idea. And I think for all of us on the call, just tap into other city departments and other city facilities that aren't your aquatic facilities and see if they just reach out and say, hey, can we do this for you? Can we make a EAP assessment team and work to teach them what it is that you're looking for and have that eagle eye? Thank you, Corey, for that information. All right, Justin, I'm going to jump back to you. As a chief medical officer, you've seen probably more things than many of us will ever see in our lifetime. Tell us about some of your experiences in the medical field, specifically with drowning, and why it's crucial for us to recognize the medical perspective of drowning prevention and treatment.
So I would say, in addition to the usual prevention messages, the fencing, barriers, the ABCs, and all of that, that probably the biggest rise over the last several years in drowning has actually been in the senior and elderly population. And that's particularly related to bathtubs and home bathing settings. And usually it has to do with taking different medications, blood pressure medications, some sedating medications, even when taken appropriately as prescribed by a doctor, sometimes being then in a hot bathtub with can then cause you to lose consciousness and then drown. And so we've been emphasizing in a lot of communities, not just the usual safety messages that are typically geared towards children, but also to that elderly population as well. And believe it or not, in Japan, the highest risk of drowning is actually in that elderly population because there's traditional baths within the home, and so they have more drowning deaths in the elderly population than in the younger population. And as much as I like to joke about the CPR guidelines being more geared towards the Walmart style heart attack, there are young people as well with diabetes, with seizure disorders, or other heart problems that that do drown, and that really becomes an important aspect when running camps, whether day camps or overnight camps, that's appropriately part of the screening or the medical clearance from their doctor before they participate, so that you know who is at risk of having a seizure, who's at risk of some of those other increased risk of drowning due to those medical factors, so that they can appropriately be watched and buddied. And nobody should be swimming alone at those events anyways, but they can be banded or otherwise, whatever the protocol is, to make sure we keep a closer eye on them.
Liddy, one thing too, from a lifeguard perspective that Justin's brought to our team, and a lot of the protocols that we build upon, is the need to interrupt the drowning process as early as possible. And oftentimes what historically was the mindset of you get the person to the surface, or you get them out of the pool, they're not drowning. But one thing that Justin has imparted on us is the need to begin to airway breathe the breaths and get the airway management going. Sorry, I'm having a hard time talking right now. But get those breaths going, because the drowning process isn't interrupted until that point. And so it's something that we spend a lot of time emphasizing in our program, with the importance of breaths in the water. If they didn't get put out of the water before we begin any on deck pulse checks or anything else, let's interrupt the drowning process first, so that we can at least rule that out, or start the airway management side of things on some level. Because the reality is, as soon as they start pulse checking, they're not going to, they're rarely going to find the pulse, because the adrenaline and everything else is going. They're probably wearing gloves, all of those things. And so then it leads to compressions. But what we're not doing is giving effective airway. And so, and that's something that I don't think I fully really appreciated until I really heard Justin speak and kind of explain it from that medical perspective, and it was very valuable.
Awesome. Wes, I'm going to stay with you.
Sure.
We are heading into, many of us are just starting to reopen pools. Many of us have been open, so in-service trainings are on the rise. When we go into these in-service trainings, obviously we're going over staff manuals, and we're going to discuss policy and procedure, which includes documentation. I know from personal experience, I'm constantly reviewing my incident reports for my staff. I have to give that constant constructive criticism of, you're not a doctor. Don't state that you think that they did this. That's you're not qualified to say that they did that, But it's really more about what you should and should not do or say or write. So can you give us some documentation best practices you feel are going to help us enhance our efforts?
Yeah, for sure. When it comes to documentation, it's a broad topic, and it's not a fun topic. Generally, it's pretty dry. So getting engagement with this can be difficult, but documentation, it's so critical. And, it's one of the first things in any sort of litigation or post-incident response that, start going through the documentation. When you talk about statements and giving statements, and specifically, it's important that they're fact-based. There's no speculation. There's no secondhand information. One of the things that I think sometimes that you don't want to necessarily alter what the person saw or what their wording is going to be, but if you just hand them a piece of paper and say, "Hey, write what happened," then there's usually speculation. There's personal opinions about things, and it can go all sorts of ways. And so a lot of times, what I learned, what really worked well, was I would just kind of do a quick debrief. Hey, what did you see? Okay, what happened? And then they say, oh, and then so-and-so said this. Okay, well, they said that to you. Did you see that? No. Okay, so what did you see? Let's focus on that and really keep it fact-based, so that it's not necessarily you're not writing it for them by any means, but you're making sure that they have the proper direction and the right information is there, because those statements can really be scrutinized, and even sometimes just semantics alone can steer an outcome one way or the other in terms of determining liability. But when you talk about documentation, you're also talking about checklists. You're talking about, training paperwork and all those things. And it's so important that it's comprehensive, it's complete, that it's consistent. One of the things that I think a lot of places get in trouble is they'll have policies and procedures that say, hey, we do this checklist every day, we have this procedure, and then they don't have the documentation to follow it, or it's inconsistently applied, and then that creates potential doubt that the facility really is adhering to their policies and procedures. I know in my operational days, one of the things that drove me crazy was getting pencil whipped maintenance checks. Or they, so you didn't find anything all day. You just, and you could tell, well, I found this, but I fixed this. Well, if you found something, you fixed it, that's okay, right? Or if you find something, acknowledge it, but make sure that it's followed up. Don't say there was a loose step on the side tower or something, and then you just hand it off, and then no one ever comes back and resolves it. Make sure there's a procedure. And one of the things that's really been good with documentation in those regards is adopting some of the electronic, because you can set procedures in place to trigger events, to trigger action items for other people to follow up, so that so you have that kind of that closure and completeness. There's not the opportunity that someone either misfilled something or whatever, because the system will make sure. So there's all sorts of things in there, but ultimately it comes down to making sure that it's complete, that it's objective, fact-based, that and there's a lot of consistency in the day-to-day operation.
Appreciate that.
Justin.
At the top.
All right, and I would add to that also that, again, I feel like I'm always the doom and gloom guy, because so much of what we do is prevention, but my focus is once we get to that resuscitation, once prevention has failed and there's been a rescue, and not infrequently these cases wind up in legal proceedings as well, typically civil, where there's a lawsuit, and everything is scrutinized, and everything is poured over by lawyers on all sides. And if you didn't write it down, then it didn't happen. And as Wes was saying, first we kind of look at the standard of care of what would a reasonably prudent person in that same scenario with that same level of training do. And then the next layer after that is, did you follow your own department's internal policies? And that is, even if you did the CPR or the rescue part the same as anybody else would in that situation, if your policy said guard 1 does airway, guard 2 responds with the bag, guard 3 calls 911, guard 4 does whatever, and you didn't follow that and there was a bad outcome, well, then you can still have some degree of liability, right? It's not binary black and white, it's all shades of gray. And not following your own internal policies, not having those checklists on the daily AED checks, your daily chemical checks, or if we look back and the chlorine level was exactly the same at exactly 4 p.m. in exactly the same ink and handwriting on the logbook, then that's going to be suspect. And all of that is going to be taken into consideration. And then probably the big one that I see in a lot of these lawsuits is in-service training, appropriate documentation of in-service training, because when depositions are scary, they're scary for me. I don't, I still get my heart rate up going into them when I'm just serving as the expert, right? I'm not the one that's in trouble or being sued or anything like that. But you get a 17 or 18-year-old seasonal lifeguard that's being deposed, and they say, I don't remember what we did in our in-service trainings. I think they might have talked about something. Well, did you ever sign in? Did you ever sign out? Do they keep a log? I don't know. I think Wes does that. And then they go to Wes, and it's an incomplete log that just has some names scribbled on the back of a sheet of paper, and it doesn't count as anything, no matter how much time and effort you put into those in-services. If they're not appropriately documented, then when they matter in those instances, you may as well have not done them, because you don't have that clear evidence behind it to show that we've been doing these every week. We do require our guards. We do have a process in place so that if a guard is absent that day, that they make up that in service, that they're still getting that information. Because I've seen cases as well where it just so happens that that guard was out every Friday and in services were done every Friday. And so that guard may have gone the entire season with no in services, with no process in place to capture them. Or things like that. And so it's not just the documentation of the incident report, but as Wes said, it's kind of those mundane, day-to-day, no news is good news reports that you're doing, and making sure that that they are up to date and accurate and easy to find.
Excellent. Dan, go ahead. A year and a half later, we're still stuck on mute.
Well, I'm gonna throw in 1 minute of self-promotion, but right along this line, we built an app that tracks all of it. So all of your in-service, all of your daily tasks, all of your maintenance tasks, everything. And if anybody doesn't have this dialed in, if you have it dialed in, forget me. But if you don't have it dialed in and you want to be part of the beta program for it for your city, please email me and I'll put my email in it. We use the app internally for the past 5 years. So the last time we had a CPR incident a couple of years ago, and the insurance company called and police came in and said, well, show me Emilio's training history. Well, I was able to literally go boop, boop, and pull up 5 years of training history for Emilio and the 45 times he did live CPR in training and so on and so forth. So if you don't have it dialed in, please email me. But if you do, forget me.
Yeah, I think too, to add on to that, when we switched over to our new HR process system, we jumped on board with them to say, hey, if you guys are going to require our harassment trainings to be signed up through this, online system, we want all of our trainings to be able to be signed up. And so now all of our staff, it's all on record online, and it's super easy to access. So almost every agency already has a system in place because HR is required to have it and to have that record. It's, you can use the app, you can use that, but just do something to make sure. Because I can tell you from personal experience, when we had the drowning in 2018, it was less than 20 hours where I had a team of lawyers coming in saying, all right, let's pull all the documentation. How does this look? Wait, let's list every single person that was involved. And we had it right there and accessible, but just even that was stressful, even though I knew I had it. So having it not organized, I can't tell you, the stress level will go up, and that's when mistakes get made. So make sure that your documentation is all on point. Thank you, Wes. I appreciate that. Dan, I have leaned on Premier on many occasions to save us during summer staff shortages. When we brought you on as a contractor, one of the first things I know that you and I talked about is reviewing our EAP, our equipment, our process, our documenting. Give us maybe some examples from a private sector kind of standpoint of maybe things that agencies should know and what they should know to expect when they're hiring an outside company for lifeguard services. And then how do you handle things like uniform, certification, documentation when you're working with an outside agency?
Sure. So the important thing to know is that we are a lot of things to a lot of different people. So in your instance, we come in literally, I think I got an email from you last week saying we need these 2 5:45 a.m. shifts covered. Can you help us? So we do that. And then we go all the way through to full facility management with swim lessons, swim teams, lifeguard trainings, lifeguard services, front desk, back desk, everything that you can think of. The biggest thing is, we can be everything to everyone, but it's just being very clear with that agency with exactly what you're looking for, and knowing that we're going to come in, as you know, and poke holes, and we're going to talk about the things that we can do better and things that we should be doing better. And if we're going to work alongside with your staff, we need X, Y, and Z, because we don't feel as comfortable. And I'm using you as an example, not a reality, but as an example. So being able to go in there, and Wes, you and I have had this conversation, I'm working alongside with someone else's staff, and we're liable for everything going on there. So we're going to come in and poke holes and ask questions and make sure it is to a certain standard. And, but the biggest thing is that it takes time, and it takes time to learn exactly what the community wants. I think our biggest challenge, when I heard about the EAP question for Corey, our biggest challenge is that most of our staff are alone, or maybe there's 2 of them on a pool deck. So how do we train across Arizona, Northern California, and down? How do we run in services for those people when we're in a 10-week summer season? So we subscribe to, we train every day, every shift, every day. We go through it, and being able to utilize the facilities to do that. And there are challenges, but it makes it really easy, and we love it. It's what we do. And we had the same hiring issues this year than everybody else did. This year, I think we are at 450 right now. Last year, this time we were at 550 with less facilities. So it's a challenge. We're struggling, but just open communication lines. And then with regards to certifications, uniforms, generally speaking, we supply everything as part of the service. And then, some cities, we've got the city crest on the arm. Some cities, we've got the city crest on the chest and nothing Premier on it. And then other cities, it's all Premier and it's all whatever it needs to be. So really just knowing what the city wants and what they'll accept and what your residents will accept is just clear up front. And then most agencies will do what you want. We work for you. So
I love it. Okay, Corey, we're going to jump into some leadership concepts. Before we talked about how we get our aquatic leaders ready for non-aquatic positions and leadership roles. Let's flip the script. And what are some tips or advice that you would offer someone maybe looking for that career in aquatic management?
Yeah, I think to start off with, I would say take calculated risks and try new things. I think it's very easy to step into an aquatics role and just take over and go with the flow and do what's there before you. But I think we only get better if we try new things and experiment with our programs and what's going there and what's going on. I think that's how we grow as an aquatic professional. The other thing is train and train and prepare your staff. So we can't do all of the fun things, the swim meets and the rec swim and the birthday parties and all these good things if our staff aren't ready to respond in the event of an emergency. And, unfortunately, once that happens, it does change everything. And that might preclude us from being able to move forward and do those things that we always wanted to do. So make sure that your staff are ready to go. The biggest thing with training too is I'd say focus on the positives and reiterate those good behaviors, but then really work on the negatives and work on the things that we need to improve on and spend some extra time. This kind of goes back to the discussion earlier in the conversation of advocating for those dollars and making sure that you have that. I think, coming from private industry, I can tell you the model was cut your staff training hours down. That's an easy way for us to save money. Or instead of 2 guards up on a 2-pool facility, which was already too little, let's go to 1. And then we'll use the coaches as secondary guards. And I had to fight the good fight, being 24 years old, going up there to this owner that was a penny pincher and say, this isn't right. We're going to have an issue here. And unfortunately I didn't win and I left. And that's why I ended up in California, because it just wasn't a good situation in the end. And I realized, I'm going down with the ship if something happens as well. So to this day, knock on wood, they're still okay, but they still are only having 1 guard up. But sometimes like 350 people in that facility swimming at once. So it's huge. So make sure that you're explaining why. And, if you have to reach out to people like West and Justin and these guys that have been there and been through these depositions and stuff, use them as your benefit or to your benefit to educate. So that's a huge thing. And then the last thing is mentor and develop and use your team. So trust your staff. I think a lot of us fall into the trap where we want to do it all and we want to be the decision maker, but our staff have really good ideas. And there's all sorts of things that they come up with that can help improve our operations. So really setting up an open door policy where they can come in and provide suggestions, whether it's operational, whether it's a program, and really challenge them to come up with better ways to do things and then use those and also give them the credit once you implement that. But I think those are the 2 big things. And I will say, I kind of said it before, the city implemented a new mentorship program this last year, which was so beneficial. They matched all of our staff with different departments. So there was not one CS community services staff matched with a community services staff member. they were matched with police or community development. And it was really, really beneficial to help them grow and see how other departments do things. And I think it improved everybody's operations in the end. So I would say setting up a program like that is extremely beneficial as well.
Thank you, Corey.
I would add too, kind of inspired by what Corey said, but also kind of a common theme that keeps coming up is this constant fight for showing that lifeguards are important. And, it took us decades to prove medically that smoking was bad for you, right? It's a no-brainer, but it took that long. And there's not a lot of good studies that say lifeguards are beneficial. And there's not a lot of good studies that say lifeguards are good for you. And I frequently, when talking in the nonprofit sector, will say there's no nonprofits out there advocating for don't touch a hot stove, right? Because the feedback is immediate and severe, and you don't have to tell somebody a second time. But it's really hard to measure prevention. And it's really hard to say, if we do our job correctly, you're never going to hear from us and we'll be in the background. And so when talking to the city managers, when talking to some of those other people that fund, we don't wear seat belts. Let me start over. Everybody on this call can probably go the next year without wearing a seatbelt, and nothing bad is ever going to happen to us until it does. And we don't wear seatbelts because something's going to happen to me today. It's because something's going to happen to me one day. And I have to be in the habit of 100% wearing my seatbelt, so that literally 1 in 10,000 time of putting on my seatbelt, I need it and it's there. And we have to approach our lifeguards in that same way. Putting the appropriate number of lifeguards up in the stand is just like putting your seatbelt on, right? You didn't use your seatbelt at all on the way into work today, and that's good. You put your lifeguard in that stand and you didn't have to use them today, that's good. But what you're asking me to do is now half the time drive to work with no seatbelt. And most days that's going to be okay until it's not. And when it's not, it's going to be a really big deal. And you really have to reframe how the lifeguards are approached.
I think you might have just built our new aquatic section bumper sticker. Lifeguards are good for you. Justin, you're giving us all the nuggets. I love it. All right, Wes, we're going to go back to in-services. One of the things that bullet points that you and I talked about was, balancing those in-services with fun and training to save a life. And that was a topic that came up on Tuesday as well. Talk to us about the use of experiential and scenario-based training in order to create trainings that are realistic and that simulate pressure to set up lifeguards to succeed.
Yeah, and I think, what you hit on the end, we're setting the lifeguards up to succeed, right? And so oftentimes what we see in in-service is that there will be activities, there might be some experiential components, but a lot of times they do a few scenarios, there's a lot of talking, potentially lecturing, and the reality is lifeguards, they learn by doing, right? But one of the big things that I see with in-services, and we see this, like we do safety audits at our client facilities, and they say, oh, let's go to this pool, let's set up the scenario, and they're setting up the same scenario that they do in service over and over and over, instead of really, and they'll put the backboard right by the pool and they'll have the equipment here, rather than really setting it up the way it's going to be in a real life event. And so when we're talking about creating scenarios, one of the easy ways to do is, hey, what's happened in the past, right? Has there been incidents? Let's recreate that incident and put all the equipment, all the people in the right position. Let's not have everybody standing by the side of the pool, glove zone, backboard in hand, all those types of things, and really set them up the correct way. But also, what are ways to apply pressure? Sometimes videotaping is a good way, because it's like right now, this is being recorded, right? And so you when things are being recorded, there's a little more pressure because it stays with you. But any way we can create it and make it just as realistic as possible, but also keep it where they're doing the work as much as possible, running multiple scenarios, using your entire facility. In my career as an operator, I think I was in my 15th year, and I had my first true drowning event. And it occurred at a massive resort. And in this resort, we'd get 10,000 people a day. It occurred in a 14-inch deep, shallow water pool that entered into a lazy river area. And we had never once done a scenario in that pool, and never in a million years. I mean, child was wearing a life jacket, was in crystal clear water, 10 feet from a lifeguard, 14 inches of water, and a drowning occurred. And, you know, and they had a positive outcome. And there's a lot more story to that. But point being is that, you know, all of a sudden, you know, the lifeguards are responding to an event that we'd never simulated, you know, and that was a lesson learned for me that, you know, make sure we're getting out of the convenient factor of, oh, go to the deep end, oh, do this, kind of recreating that. And then, you know, I think another way to kind of create in-service and make it fun and kind of realistic is contact your local fire and EMS, see if they want to participate with you. Because a lot of times it's really good to run a few scenarios and have that, because that also creates a level of reality and what they're all going to experience if something happens. And there's a lot more education that happens about which gate they might come in, or entrance, or, you know, when they exactly will take over, when they won't, that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of things you can do. The key is just making sure in-service isn't all fun, or it isn't all lecture. It's not the same thing over and over.
If I add one thing to that.
Yeah.
Don't waste a good opportunity to educate your community. So when we do those large scale scenarios with fire and EMS en route, we tell the whole community it's happening, and we look for community volunteers to play dead and to go through the opportunity. And we've had hundreds of people show up to watch this thing go down and watch training. So don't waste a good opportunity.
Very good idea. And then I would add also, the buzzword for the fire departments is pre-planning. So if you call the local fire department and just say, hey, will you come to our lifeguard in service? They're probably going to say, we really don't want to. But if you say, hey, will you help with our pre-planning exercise? And just like Wes said, it's training for them to say, hey, if we did have an event at this slide, how would we extricate them? Which gate would you come in? Where would you park? Here's, you know, what's best for you. And so you're asking for their engagement to say, how can we make our facility more accessible to you in an emergency? What do you need from us? But then you can also gauge response times, and you can show them what equipment you have. Here's the brand of AED that we have, and maybe it just unplugs and plugs right back into their monitor, and now they don't need an extra something. And these are all things that are part of the fire department and EMS standard practice. And routinely, they'll drive around a city in their area of responsibility, just looking at the fire escapes, just looking at the hydrants, just looking at those access points and gates and things like that as part of their standard pre-planning.
I think to tap into that too, we do a lot of work with OCFA. We've done the mock drowning situations with audiences of 100+ people. You know, it's just mind-boggling to see people go, oh, that's what happens. People in the audience just don't realize how severe it gets and how quick it goes and what it looks like in a rec swim environment. We do a bunch of kids in the pool, and there's just one kid that swallows water and goes under. And how long does it take to do that rescue? So great ideas by both of you guys. I'd say another thing that I'd add on to that when you're working with EMS is, we had so much support after our drowning, but we learned a lot about the AED report and what it tells you and your timeline. And that for us was our kudos. Like, that was when we were in such a slump of feeling so low. I mean, nobody ever wants to lose a life. That's the worst thing that could ever happen to your team. But to get that report back and to see how quickly we responded, how quickly that AED was turned on, and that the lawyers turned around and they said, phenomenal. This is great. Fire chief came back, phenomenal, you know? And so those types of things, really understand what your timeline is, because if you are not practicing time with how you are performing CPR and how you're giving the rescue breaths and when you're giving the shock and all of that, it's all on record. That AED machine says everything. It tells you exactly when your staff did what. And so really practice that too. I think that's a crucial element when we're doing anything mock and anything training.
Yeah, and that brought up some other things for me. So I've been involved in a legal case where the AED report did exactly the opposite. So the lifeguards claimed one thing, and then the AED report shows that they didn't give a single effective rescue breath, because in addition to measuring the cardiac rhythm and your chest compressions, it also measures by impedance of the chest as it moves, whether or not you're giving effective rescue breaths as well. And then the case settled as soon as that AED report came out and showed that the lifeguards never gave a single effective rescue breath. And to the point, to kind of tie these two together, of the insert of the training and what to do during an event is your police department. In most jurisdictions, for a drowning call, a police officer is dispatched as well, and they may be the first one on scene. In some communities, they may have an AED, they may be CPR or first responder or EMT paramedic trained, and knowing and understanding that level of training, because when the lifeguards see anybody in a uniform show up, they assume they know more than them and may step away, when in fact the lifeguards may be better trained to handle that scenario and task the police officer to do something else, like crowd control, like clearing the gate for the ambulance or whatever. Or you may use the police officer to take over. And then as far as recording, most are wearing body worn cameras or body cams now. And I'm seeing now in more of these drowning cases, when the police officer arrives and goes to where the lifeguards are performing CPR, now it's all recorded. And now we can see, as more officers arrive, we have angles and angles of timelines and establishing exactly how many compressions are given per minute. And I'm telling you, it takes about a minute per second. So it takes, a long time to watch these videos, because we're counting the exact number of chest compressions given before they switch, the exact number of breaths, how long, and creating detailed timelines down to the second of what happens as these events are dissected.
Awesome. Yeah, we've learned so much from our partnership with the fire authority. It's been really educational. And I think, when we talked about recognizing staff as well, we had a older gentleman. He was showing symptoms of a possible heart attack. Guards got him out of the pool, got him into a chair just to kind of just do an assessment, and he just dropped right out of the chair. And guards were on it, CPR. And it's that compliment you can get from the fire authority when they come on deck and they don't take over CPR, because they've got other things to be looking at and assessing, and your lifeguards can still be doing the chest compressions and the rescue breathing until you don't, we had our guards go all the way onto the gurney, onto the ambulance. I mean, that's just, they were doing such a great job. But even though the gentleman did pass away, I mean, he had a heart attack. There was, at that point, it was, fate. But one of the coolest things that happened out of that is, because of our partnership with OCFA, they recognized those guards in front of council, and they explained that they did their job the right way, that it wasn't about the guards not doing their job the right way. And so I think that when we talk about those partnerships with police and with fire, though we are in competition with them for the budget at all times, I think the more that we build that triangle of trust with those two agencies, I think that we're going to be it's going to be much more of a benefit in the end and in the long run. So thank you guys for all of your input on that. All right, let's see. I think I'm going to wrap it up with you, Justin. We're constantly looking for new research that helps us understand why things work or don't in the world of life-saving, specifically in aquatics. If you can, talk to us maybe about the evolution of emergency care standards, and is there some new science or new studies that are becoming available that we can use to better prepare ourselves, and why is it important for us to know and share?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the evolution probably over the last 20 years of the CPR guidelines has really been kind of focusing down from speculation to having better and better evidence to support what we do. And it really has come to support that effective chest compressions and effective rescue breaths are the most beneficial intervention. And doing them early and correctly can be more beneficial than drugs and medications or breathing tubes from the paramedics. And if we're going to give effective rescue breaths, it needs to be the correct rate and the correct volume. If we're going to be giving appropriate chest compressions, it needs to be the correct rate and the correct depth. And the only way to know that you're doing it right is to do it in training and use a device that has feedback, do realistic training, have a hands-off captain during your resuscitation that is using a metronome app on their phone or some other way to kind of make sure that we're not giving too many or too few breaths. We're not giving too fast or too slow compressions. And really the evolution has been towards this team-focused approach where everybody has a role and everybody knows what their role is going to be as the first arriving guard, as the second arriving guard, as the first arriving supervisor. And you can plug in any person into that and they know I'm the third arriving, here's what my role is going to be, so that it really is choreographed. And then you have somebody that's kind of overlooking and being that hands-off captain to make sure that everything is getting done. And so gone are the days of, just go as hard and fast as you can and just do something, to, well, what we are doing needs to be correct. And the only way to make sure it's correct is to measure it in training and measure it in real time when it's actually occurring.
Anyone want to add anything more on that? Justin, if you have any articles that we could share maybe with some of our crew, please send Stephanie and I the links and we will make sure that we get it out to everybody. That pretty much wraps us up for our DIP speaker series. I just want to give kudos and thanks to our panelists for taking the time out today and sharing all of this information. It's just always nice to get some new faces out here and to just kind of hear some new information. So thank you guys for taking the time out of your busy schedules and making our aquatic professional development a priority. I see that there's links going up. I will leave it open if you guys want to open up and ask any questions at this point, but if not, thanks for joining us for the DIP speaker series. We'll be doing this on a quarterly calendar, and you will be receiving a kind of Google Doc survey. So if we can just get your feedback on it, just so that way we have great topics to talk about in the future. Again, thank you all so much. Appreciate you guys being on, and I hope that all of you guys have a great day.
Thank you, guys.